In this video tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to build your first Angular 2 application. Now, when I say application, what I really mean is just a website, a project. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you initially how to create a web page and links and then different pages, basically. Now, something like that, if we did it with standard HTML and CSS, well, that would be pretty easy, right? Well, with Angular, it's a little bit more complicated, specifically with Angular 2. So with Angular 2, it's really leaning towards the idea that the user should have a much better and faster user experience, in that they shouldn't have to reload the entire page, right? They should just reload areas of it. So for example, if you have a content area on your web page and the user clicks to another page, the user content area should update on the page. It shouldn't reload the entire page. So it's just targeting areas of the DOM rather than reloading everything and repeating all the HTTP requests, etc. It saves on load time, download time, all that kind of stuff for a better user experience. It's similar to the way that you would use Ajax. Now this is Angular 2, so if you know Angular 1, well, it really doesn't matter. I mean, great if you know Angular 1, because it's actually still a pretty popular language. But Angular 2 is a completely rewritten language. They've rewritten everything about it. In fact, Angular 2 has actually not been officially released yet. It's very, very close. So this is a good time to learn it, because it's really not going to change all that much between now and when it is officially released. Another good reason why you might want to learn Angular is because if you are looking for a new job, or maybe you're looking to get into the industry, there is a lot of jobs at the moment for Angular. Now in this initial video, and again this is a tutorial series, which means that it's impossible to cover everything in one individual tutorial. So in this series, we're going to look at everything to do with Angular, from building a single page application and all the things that involves. Now initially, what I want to do is I want to mock up a page. I want to show you how to actually build a website. Given that it will be fairly basic, I'm going to give you something in this tutorial that you could deploy online and literally begin building websites using with what you learn in this video tutorial. So what's the rest of the series going to be about? Well, we're going to dive into best practices, how do you model and mock your data, injection, and various things like directives, pipes. At the moment, those things might not mean anything to you. But at the end of this tutorial series, and as they're released over time, they're going to show you how to build websites and applications with Angular 2, and it's really going to show you how to do everything and do everything the way that it should be, and that's properly. But in this initial tutorial, we're going to show you how to get started and really give you a good foundation. Now, when I learned Angular 2, given it may or may not have been that long ago, one thing that I struggled with initially was wrapping my head around some of the concepts and what everything was. And I don't really agree with that approach. Now that I have learned it and I do know all those things, I think there's just a better way of doing it, and perhaps that's just my way. So the way I want to do this is, I'm not going to start this tutorial telling you what everything is. I'm not going to start telling you what a component is. I'm not going to tell you what ng on init is. I'm not going to dive into directives and services and all those kind of things. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to start the tutorial. Once I finish this intro, I'm going to show you how to use them, and then I'm going to come back and say, well, you know what this is? This is a component. Because really, I think that's the best way to learn. If you're looking to create your own website, then please check out our official site, which is siteeasy.com. We will add a link to the description of this video, and we offer a single platform which will enable you to develop your own online store, social network, or content management website. It has switches built into it, so you can actually manage which features you use and don't use. And of course, there's so much more that I couldn't possibly tell you in this short introduction. So please visit our website, browse around the features, browse our online demo, and learn more about the products and services that we offer. And of course, contact us at any time if you have any questions. Now, the other important point about this is that we will actually be adding, following the completion of this video and we upload it online, we will be adding a scripts area to our official website, and one of the products that we will be offering will actually be the product files of this tutorial. So if you would like to skip the whole development process of building this Angular 2 application, then please just visit our website, browse our site, and you'll be able to actually download the files that we develop in this tutorial and the changes that we do going forward in the series. Simpletut.com. Now this is a great resource for you if you are still trying to learn web development and wrap your head around various different programming languages. You can browse all of our tutorials, all of which you can find also on our official YouTube channel, but we also offer them here. You can search, browse around, make requests, and of course access our free downloads. So let's get started. Now, as you can see, what I've done is I've navigated to the official Angular 2 website. You can see that here. I'm going to be putting a link to this website in the description of this video. And the one thing I'd just like to say is that they have so much useful information on this website, and actually some really good project tutorials and various things that can teach you a great deal. So if you ever do get stuck, this is a great point of reference. But the best thing about it is actually they have a seed project. So if we click on Get Started and then we come over to Quick Start Seed, you can either use npm, which is of course Node Package Manager, to install and set this up, probably be a little bit quicker, or you can manually download it by clicking this link here. Now occasionally this is updated, but I don't think it will be updated for a while. So at least for the time this video is released, you can come here and download this project. Now when you do download that project, you're going to get this. And what this is basically all the various configuration files and modules that they're kind enough to save us the time in creating. Now before we can actually get started with these files in this project, you're going to need to download and install npm, which is Node Package Manager. And you can download that. Again, I'll be putting a link in the description of this video. But if you just come over to node.js.org and download the version for your machine, you know, whether it's Mac or Windows, etc., download and install that, and that will basically allow us to proceed with the video. I'll cover more about what we're going to be using this. This is basically a runtime environment that we can use to set up our light testing server, etc., and run our application on our dev or local environment. The next thing is that we're going to be using Atom. This is going to enable us to work with TypeScript. So what is TypeScript? Well, TypeScript is a language in itself. Angular was actually built using TypeScript, which is a Microsoft language. The reason that we use TypeScript opposed to JavaScript, which you can also use, but of course it's a little bit different, is because it enables us to access all the new features of JavaScript that are not currently supported within current web browsers. This is just going to enable us to do that kind of thing. So that's why we're going to be using Atom, because it's one of the editors available, open source free editors that enable you to use TypeScript. Now before we actually run our application for the first time, I'm just going to cover two important files that are in the application folder that you just downloaded. So what I recommend is you download that seed project. It will download as a zipped file. That is of course if you did the manual download opposed to the Node Package Manager. But once you extract that file, that folder, I just recommend that you place that folder on your desktop. So you can see here it just says Quick Start Master. You can rename this folder anything you want. So maybe if you create a folder for your website or whatever you want, it's up to you. But inside of this file, you're going to find two important ones initially, and that's package.json and TS stands for TypeScript config. What this basically means is, as I said before, as you can see, we have a modules. These are all the modules that we need to actually run our application. And without explaining this too much, it's really just the initial configuration that we need to run our application. So how do we run our application? Well, let's go ahead and do just that. So the way we do that is we use Node. As I mentioned before, this is our runtime testing environment. And the way you access Node or use Node is actually through your terminal, or if you're on a Windows machine, you would use your CMD. How do you find terminal? Well, you can do it in various ways. The easiest way is I just click on search, type in terminal, and there you go. It's going to give us our terminal is going to pop up. And as you can see here, the first thing I need to do is actually navigate inside of my project folder. This is, again, I mentioned, I said we should open this file and place it on our desktop. You can call it whatever you want, but the way you access that and you navigate into it through your terminal is very simple. You just say cd space desktop / and then the name of the folder. So it's going to be Quick Start Master. And if you look here now on this line, it says Quick Start Master. So that tells me that I've successfully entered into this folder. Now, if you're on a Mac, it's much easier to do. As you can see, all I literally did was cd desktop Quick Start Master. Now, the reason I mention that is because if you are on a Windows machine, which is very possible, there's a lot of people that use Windows, that's fine. You'll need to open up your CMD and navigate to this same folder. It's a little bit different on Windows. It's a little bit more complicated. You have to go through your C drive users, your computer username, and then desktop. So just look that up. I'm not going to cover basics like this in this tutorial. Hopefully I'm not going too fast, but if you do have any questions, then you can type that into Google, check out the Angular website, YouTube tutorials, or maybe just leave a message and perhaps a member of our team or myself can get back to you and try and help you out. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to install all of our modules so we can actually run our testing server. So what you need to do is use Node or npm, Node Package Manager. We just say Node Package Manager, so npm space install. Click on return, and it's going to take a second or two, but as you can see, it's just going to install all of our modules, all of our dependencies. It's going to go through, and as I said, it might take a while. So I'm going to pause the video and return. Once it's installed, we'll be able to actually launch our testing server. Great. So as you can see, we have now installed all of our modules and our dependencies. And this is actually a good time for me to explain a little bit more about what I meant by these configuration files. So you can see these are all the modules which we're basically trying to configure for our project. And now that we've run the Node Package Manager installation, we have a new folder, and this is called Node Modules. And this is the way it basically spits out all of our code. It just creates this folder, really quick, really easy, and this is everything we need basically. We're going to cover and explain a little bit more about modules later on in the series, in the video, but for now let's leave that there. So the next thing that we need to do, and we've just installed our as I said, our modules and everything, but we are still inside our Quick Start Master, so we don't have to navigate away or inside anything else. All we have to do now is pretty easy. We just say npm Node Package Manager space start, and we do that and click enter. It's going to set up our light server, and it's going to launch in our default web browser. Okay, so you can see it says hello Angular. So this is our seed project. By default, all they have set up is basically just a single page, which just says hello Angular. Now, of course, if you're seeing this, it means that you've done it successfully and it's working. So thumbs up, congratulations, you've got this is your first Angular application that you've successfully set up. And some more good news is you're not really going to need to use your terminal anymore. So I'm just going to minimize that. If you want to access it, it's just come down and click on this. So don't worry about that. And as you can see, we can actually start to build our application, our website from this point. Now, there's a few really good things about the way this works. So the way that this works is this is all in real time. So if I make any kind of change, it's going to immediately update on our web page, and you're going to see more examples of that as we go. Okay, so as you know, what we've done so far is we have launched our application. But before we get started, I've skipped ahead and I've done a few things that's going to save us some time. So the first thing that I've done is I've opened up the most important files that we currently have within our application. So as I mentioned before, we have our main app directory. This is going to house the most important elements of our application. But outside of our app folder, we also have two important files, and that's going to be our index.html file and our CSS style sheet. So our index.html file, if we open that up, you're going to notice that within our body tags, we only have one element, one HTML element. And this may look a little bit unfamiliar. If you look at it, it says my app. And you may think to yourself, well, what is that? Well, actually, with HTML5, we can create our own custom elements that we can use on our page. And Angular 2 takes full advantage of that. And we're going to get into that a little bit more later on in this tutorial. But the most important thing at this point to understand with the HTML file itself is that this is going to house basically all of the includes. So anything that we might want to include, we would do within this file. So if you create a normal static HTML website and you link and you create pages and you link between them, then one thing that you'll do is you're going to create multiple files within your root folder, within your website's directory. With Angular, with an Angular application, as I mentioned before, you do not do that. You have one file. As you can see, we have a custom element, which is my app, and as the name suggests, we dynamically populate our application within this. And what we're going to do with Angular is we're going to create links. They're not going to be hrefs. They're not going to actually physically link to another page. They're going to basically trigger our application to reload an area of our DOM and basically show different content based on changes within the URL. But in the same way, we still use this file to import various other libraries or various other things. So for example, you could add a link to jQuery if you wanted to use that within your project. You could add that to your HTML file here. But one example that I've done is I've included a custom font. So I've gone ahead and I've navigated to Google Fonts. If you're not familiar, this is a great resource for any developer. And what this allows you to do is, as you can pretty much gather, is include a custom font. Well, not a custom font, but a font within your project. So these are all completely free to use. It's a Google service. It's brilliant. And I've just selected to use Roberto. It's probably one of the a lot of people use this font, but it is a nice font. And if you don't know how to use it, you just browse their library. They have, I don't know how many they have, but they have many fonts available. And then you can obviously just come here, customize it, select the various font weights that you want, get your embed code, etc. And this is your CSS reference. You can see here the load time is fast. I'm not going to get into this because this is getting away from the tutorial, but what I've done is I've used this as an example is that you can include libraries and frameworks, etc. in your project using this HTML file. Now, again, in this tutorial, trying to incorporate everything into this. We are building a website, and we're going to be using this style sheet. This is our CSS style sheet. Now, when we create components, you do have the ability to define a style sheet for each individual component. I think that's very unnecessary, and I think when it comes to long-term maintaining the website, it would be much more difficult to maintain if you had multiple style sheets. I can't really think of an example of where it would be beneficial to use multiple style sheets. So what I do is I just have a single HTML file. As you can see, it's referenced here. We call it here. And in the style sheet, I'm obviously doing that. I'm referencing that on the body. So obviously, as I said, we have Roberto. I've set a default font size and line height, color, max width, sorry, for the entire website, which is going to be 1920, all the way down to probably 320, which is iPhone 5. We're centering it for larger screens, making sure that our margin top and bottom and all of our padding is 0 on the body. Then I've got a default H1, which we're going to be using in the project. I've just added some styling for that. I've also, just a tip, at the top of my style sheet, I like to make a few notes. This is again just going to help me, if I work on multiple projects, I return to this after a while. I might have forgotten what fonts I included in the project. So things like fonts, but not limited to just that. You might want to reference them at the top. So I can see here, this is the font I'm using. I'm using Roberto. This is the reference. I'm using the following font weights are included in the project. So I've got regular and bold. So it's just a useful thing to do. And you might think to yourself, well, I don't want to have all these unnecessary comments within my style sheet, in terms of load time and best practice, etc. Well, actually, that's a null issue, because before you actually deploy this, you should be minifying your style sheet. I'm not going to explain what that is. You should know. If you don't, please look up what that means. But when you minify your style sheet, it basically removes all your spaces. It puts everything in one line. So comments and things like that isn't going to be an issue. But in your dev, your local environment, when you're working with these files, it's definitely something that helps going forward. The other important files at this stage would be something like our app component. This is our first component, which was included in the seed project. Now, what is a component? So a component is basically the different elements that make up and build your page. So let's look at it like this. You might have a header section and a navigation just below that, a content area, and a footer. Now, with Angular 2, each one of those elements would be a component within itself. And each one of those components would have its own unique markup, would have its own unique selector, and various things like that. And again, I'm not really going to get into that at this point. I'd rather show you and then return to it to explain it. But if you look at what this file actually contains, so obviously when we ran our npm install, we basically installed our various modules, and one of them was the component module, which you can see here at the very top of the page of the file. We are importing that module from Angular core. So without getting into that, you can see we're defining our component here. So we have a selector. So as I mentioned before in our index.html file, we have our my app element, and we're populating that with the contents of this particular component, which at the moment is just got a h1. And that h1 is basically defined within the template of the component. So the template of the component is the HTML, is the physical, you can look at it as the physical markup that would build that element. So there's various ways of inputting the HTML here. The best way of doing it is actually linking to a separate file. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to expand my app directory. I'm going to right click and say new file, and I'm going to call this main.html. Click on return. You can see that file is created within the directory. I've also got it opened by default. So to use a separate file, and again, there's nothing wrong with doing it kind of inline here, but I just prefer to do it this way. You say template uppercase U, template URL, and then here instead of having this, all we would say is we want to basically point to that file. So it's main.html. And we can save that. Now every single time that we save, what No Package Manager is going to do for us is it's going to compile our code, and then it's going to update our browser. So you can see that didn't work, so there's something wrong here, and we need to go into the app directory. So if I save that again, it should compile our code. And you see there's nothing in here, because if we actually come over to our HTML file, this is blank. So let's just restore what we had before. Let's just put in a H1, and we're just going to say that this is our container, and let's close off that HTML. Sorry, that heading tag. And you see here, you can see we've got our container H1 here. And you can see, just to show you, if I inspect this, is that it's loaded into our my app custom, our element here. So it's loaded that in. Now, what I also should have mentioned here is that I've switched over to Google Chrome. So by default, you know, when you launch your testing server through No Package Manager, it's going to open in your default browser. So you just want to copy this URL into Google Chrome, and this is just going to help you because the dev tools within Google Chrome by far superior to any other browser. I'd recommend this being your default browser anyway, but if it isn't, please do, because apart from anything else, if you are trying to follow along with this video, it's going to be much easier to do it with using the same tools that I'm actually using. And coming back to what I was talking about previously, we have an export class, and this is basically where you define the name of this component, and that's going to be important as we go along. I'm not going to cover what we have in here. We're going to get to this export classes and what we put in here. We're going to get to that later on and further down the line. At the moment, we do not need to cover this. We'd be going a little bit too fast, and it can get a bit complicated, so we're not going to worry about that. Now if we come over, we have app modules.tss. This is the last file I just want to mention, and this is basically every time that you create something like a component, you need to come back here and you just need to declare that within your declarations. Again, I'm not really going to cover this too much at the moment. We are going to get back to this when we are ready. So let's just look at creating our first component now. We want to basically create our page layout. So we're going to create a header, a navigation, we're going to create a content area, and a footer. So it's a very simple page. So let's go ahead and do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to my app directory. I'm going to create a new folder. I'm just going to call this my header. Click on return. That's going to, if I expand that, it's created a header directory for me. I'm also then going to create a new file, and this is going to be prefixed with app, and this is going to be app.header_component.ts. Click on enter, and automatically that file is going to be created for me, and it's also going to be opened up within Atom. Now if I open up my app header component.ts, this is basically where we're going to create our component. Now, as you can imagine, every time that we create new components, etc., it can create quite a few files and various other things that are connected with that. So it can really clog up this app directory, which is why each component I separate into individual folders. It's just going to be much easier to maintain and much quicker to manipulate these files as well. So once we create more files, more components, etc., and get deeper into this project, you're really going to be pleased that you did actually consider the architecture and how you actually do this. So let's just open up, as I said, it's already open, our header component. And if we come to our app component, we're going to use this as basically a template for all of our other components. So I'm just going to literally Control A to select everything, Control C to copy, or Command on a Mac, which is what I'm using. If I just copy that in here, we still of course need to import our component module, so we don't need to change that. but we need to change our selector. So this is what we're going to be looking to basically for in the HTML. So we're going to make this a header, which is a standard HTML5 element, but that's fine. And of course here the template URL. So within my header directory, I'm going to create another new file, and I'm just going to call this my header.html. And what that means at this point is that the template URL is going to be different. It's going to be we're going to be looking for our header directory, and then we're going to go inside that folder and look for our header.html. And of course our export class, this is just going to be called our header components. That's the name of our component. So I can save that, and we're not going to see anything change within our web page, but of course this is now here. So I'm going to copy this now, and I'm going to come back to my app component, and we need to include our new header component, and I'm going to explain why in just a second. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this import reference, and I'm going to take the name of the header component I just created, and I'm going to say import, and I'm going to paste that in. So I'm going to import the new header component from, and I just need to link to that TS file, that TypeScript file we just created. So again, what that would be is it would be through the app header, and then it would be app dot header component, and you don't need to add the file extension. So what that will enable us to do is come to our main HTML file, which I don't think we need app. Was throwing up an error. And what we need to do is come to our main HTML file, and within here we're going to add in our header. So we're just going to add in our header. This is the HTML that we're looking for within our our header component. So we're looking for header, and then we're basically going to populate it with whatever content we have within our header HTML. So we needed to import our header component within our main component, because within our main component we're going to create our header tags, which is of course what we're looking for within our app header component. So at the moment that might seem really confusing, but as we go and we keep developing things, hopefully it'll become a little bit more understandable. But before we can actually sign this off and say that we've done it, we need to just copy this here and come over to our app modules.ts, and you can see here we have imported our app component here. So underneath this we need to import the new component we created, which is of course our header component, and then we created our reference here. We just need to take this header component, we need to include it within our declarations. So I'm just going to put in a comma, space, and paste in the name of our component. We can save that. And what that now means is that if I actually come here and I look at my header HTML, I can put in another H1 here, and I can say that this is my header, and close off that H1, save it, and you can see immediately it's updated. So this is really starting to, we're building our layout. If I inspect this, just to show you the code that we're actually generating, we're looking for our my app HTML element. We're populating that with our header, and then we're populating that with our container. So that's, it's looking pretty good now. But there's still much more that we need to do. If we come back to our main HTML file, I'm going to get rid of this H1 here, because really we just want to use this as a foundation to include all of our various components. So what we now want to do is let's just keep it nice and clear. Let's just close all these things down. At the moment we don't need all these files open, so I'm just going to close them, because I just want to focus on building these components. So again, if you follow along with this, the more you do it, the more you'll understand. Again, if you pause this video, go back, replay, etc., it will definitely help. But I'm going to continue building the various components of this page. So within my app directory, I'm going to right click and say new folder, and I'm going to call this my my nav. So right click, enter, and it's going to create a folder called nav, and within this here, I'm going to create two files. The first file is going to be my app.navComponent.cs. And then I'm going to create another file, and this is going to be called my nav.html. And what I'll do is, if I just open up my app component again, I'm going to copy this, come back to my nav component, paste that in. We don't need this, of course, but what we want to do is change our selector. So I'm gonna look for nav, which is actually a valid HTML5 element anyway. And then of course here we're going to go into the nav directory, and it's going to be our nav HTML, and we're going to name this, instead of app component, it's going to be nav component. We save that, should compile. It's not showing any errors, so I would say it's compiled successfully, but of course again we just need to copy the name of the component we created, come in here, and let's just duplicate this line and add in our nav component right here, and then again here update the reference, so that the path, so it's nav and then app.nav component, and we can save that. And again, if I copy this line, come over to our app modules.ts, paste that here too, take the name of the component and add it to our declarations. So this is getting longer now, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put all these into their own lines. Much easier to work with, I would say. Again, let's just save that, and you can see here it's going to compile the code again. Now if I come back to the nav HTML, we can put all the code in here, but before I do, I'm just going to come to, I guess, my main HTML, and I'm going to create my nav element. This is what we're going to be looking for. So as you can see here, the nav element is now on the page, but it's got nothing here. That's because our nav HTML has nothing. So I'm going to make this, I'm just going to hard code it. So I'm going to create an unordered list, as you can see, and then we're going to create individual list items. And we will create anchor tags, and later on in the tutorial we're going to use references. Now normally when you create an anchor tag you use href. You don't do that with Angular. We're going to do it differently, but we're going to use this to style what we're creating. So I am going to just put in an a tag. We don't have to put that anchor tag. And here you can just put it whatever you want. So maybe home, etc. I'm going to duplicate this several times. And we can just update these links. So we got home. Then you might have, I don't know, about, and contact, and let's just get rid of that last one. Now if we save that, it's going to compile, and again you can now see we're starting to build something here. So, and that's really cool, because because you can now start to see what we're doing here and how this all kind of works, which is really, really cool. Obviously these don't have hrefs, so you can't click around and do anything, but we're going to get there. Just bear with me. So again, I'm going to close this down. Okay, so I'm going to click on the X, gonna close my nav component, I guess. And we want to create our content area, so this is where we're gonna populate all of our content. So let's go ahead and do that. And to do that, I'm going to create another folder. So I'll say new file. Oh, sorry, not new file. It will be new folder. And let's call this our content area, I guess. And then within content area directory, we're going to create another new file. Call it app.content area component.ts, and then another new file. It's going to be called our content area.html. And then if we come in here, let's open up our component.ts and our HTML file. Actually, they were already open by default. I forgot. Again, let's copy all this code from our main app component, come back to our content area component, paste that in. We don't need these two includes. And we're going to basically create our first our custom HTML5 element. That's going to be our content area. And this is going to be content area slash content area HTML. And this is going to be content area component. So if we save this, come back to our main app component, let's copy this in, duplicate this line of code, paste this in here. We have our content area, and this is our content area component. And then we want to copy this into our app modules. And then we'll just take this and add it to our declarations. And again, you're going to see this compile. There's nothing in there because at the moment we don't have anything. I'm just going to add in a h1 that's going to say page content here. Save it. Still can't see it because our main HTML doesn't have our custom HTML5 element, which is now going to say content area, I believe. So if we save it, you're going to see, and this is the first custom HTML5 element we've done. So just to show you it works, I'm just going to show you here. We have content area. We just literally came up with that. Expand it. You can see HTML that we have included within our template file. So the final thing before we can kind of show you the next step is to create our footer. So if I just close these again, and hopefully, although this has taken a while for me to code all this up, the repetition, and I believe the repetition of anything is what really helps you grasp and understand what we're doing. So you're seeing me do it again and again and repeat the process, and then you're seeing it update here, which is actually a great thing about Angular, but it's actually great for this tutorial because you can see what I'm doing in real time, how it works. So that's actually a really good thing. So let's just create our footer, and then I can kind of move on to the next step. So within our app directory, I'm creating another new folder. This is going to be our footer. And again, if I expand that, here's my footer. Right click on that. Let's say new file. And we're just going to call this our app.footer component footer.ts, and then again we want another new file, which is our footer.html. So if I expand this, let's open up these two files. They're already open. I keep forgetting that when I create them, it actually opens them up in Atom, but whatever. Let's copy all this code again. Let's come back to our footer component. Let's copy that in. We don't need these. And again, we're just going to use the footer HTML5 element anyway. It's fine. Again, this is footer, and then this is it's actually just footer HTML, and we're gonna basically call this component our footer component. Pretty obvious we do that. We're gonna copy this, come back to our main app component, temporarily paste it there. Let's copy this line, paste in the name of our component, and then here we have the path to the component itself, which is just going to be that. Then of course we just have to copy this, come back to our app modules, and just add it to our declarations. Now if we look at our footer HTML, not really sure what we want to include here at this point. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a temporary placeholder with just a h1, which is just going to say footer. And of course, then on our main HTML, we just have to add that in here. So we're just going to say it's going to create a HTML5 footer. So what that'll do is obviously it'll add that into our page. So at this stage, we're in a pretty good place. We've created our components for our page, as you can see, and we've basically created a layout. We're ready to create our web page. So at this point, we're going to kind of stop looking at Angular for just a second. And what I want to do is I just want to basically add in some basic styling that's going to make this look pretty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my styles.css. So that's here. And we're going to style this up. So what I've done is I've actually, for the purposes of this tutorial, I have gone ahead and created a demo logo for this. So I can just add it in and kind of show you it as a placeholder, if you will. So I've done that by creating a new directory within my application, which is assets. And then inside there I have graphics, and then in graphics I have my logo. So what I do is in my header HTML, so I come over to my header HTML. Obviously at the moment I just have this h1. I want to put a logo in there. So what I do is I'm going to remove this because that was just for building the structure of the page. Add a div which has got a class of logo. And then we're going to close off the div, of course, and inside this I'm going to create an image, src, same as your HTML because this is just a normal link. I'm going to add in some alt text, which is going to be logo, and then we're just going to basically point to the image itself. So as you can see, that's here. There's no console errors. That looks fine. The only thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to set inline. I'm going to set a width of 200 pixels. So probably too much actually. Maybe what's 150 look like? Still too much. 120 looks about right. So now I can come back to my CSS, and inside here I'm going to just go to my header. Obviously this is a HTML5 element, so I can just target it as normal HTML, as normal a normal header tag. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this to display block. I'm going to make this width of 100%. I'm going to set a height of about 150 pixels. And I'm going to set the background color to white. And I'm going to save it. You're going to see that it updates. I'm also going to set this now to position relative. Okay? And what I'm going to do is inside the header. And I gotta say, as I'm starting, I don't really like Atom as a CSS editor. So I'm going to... So what I've done is I've opened up in brackets the CSS file. And this is just going to be a much nicer way for me to work with the CSS. It's just much easier for me. You know, if you like any kind of editor, as I said, this is just me working with these files, and I still suggest you follow along with the same tools because it'll just be easier for you to just do everything that I'm doing. But of course, if you know, for whatever reason you have your own preferences, especially once you've completed this tutorial, absolutely go off and use whatever you like, whether it's Sublime Text or whatever editor it is. As long as it supports, you know, TypeScript and CSS and HTML, and let's face it, the only thing that is really a support issue is probably TypeScript. That's absolutely fine. But okay, let's just continue. So what I want to do now is I want to just come over here and I want to target my logo and my image specifically, and I want to say position absolute, left 0, top 50%, and then I'm going to transform and translate on the y-axis minus 50%. I'm going to duplicate that 3 times, put in my prefixes for WebKit and Moz, and as you can see, what that'll do is it'll perfectly center my logo. I'm actually going to say 10 pixels from the left. And another thing that I want to do is add in my first media query. And that media query is going to be for 1345 pixels. So what you can see here, if you look at it, our container that we created has a max width of 1345 pixels. So I'm creating a media query for that 1345 pixels, and the minute that I hit that, what I want to do is several things. I want to set the width to auto, and I want to introduce a margin on the right and left of, I don't know, maybe 3%. Again, this is a responsive website, so obviously we're going to be using media queries, and that's just going to create some nice space around our website regardless of the viewport width, or you know, the device that's being used to display it. So let's continue. Let's move away from the media query a little bit and return to our navigation. That's the next thing we want to look at. So if I inspect that real quick, we have our nav. Nav is a HTML5 element, so I'm just going to target that with CSS. And what I want to do is I just want to make sure this is a block level element. In fact, I'm going to make this inline block, and I'm going to make this float 100%. Sometimes when you have an inline block element, it can create some unwanted space, and usually that's because of the font size and line height. So I'm going to say the font size here is going to be 0, line height is 0, margin 0 auto, padding 0, and the background color is going to be black, and the color of the text is white. At the moment there's nothing here. I'm just going to find out why if I just try and inspect that. And that is because, of course, I set the font size. So that's fine to set the font size here as 0, because actually we're going to be targeting our unordered list more specifically. So both the nav and the nav unordered list, and I suppose, yeah, we're going to be setting the margin on this to 0 and the padding to 0. Then we are going to target each of the individual list items, so li, and we're going to set this to display inline and float left. And we're going to set the margin on this to probably maybe 5 pixels left and right. And then, or maybe just right, but I'll come back to it. We want to target our anchor, and what we want to say is the font size of this. So the font size of this will be, let's say, maybe 16 pixels. The line height is normal, because it should always be on one line anyway, so it should at least be 16 pixels minimum. Normal will be fine. We're going to make the text align to center. We're going to make sure the color of this, we're setting this here as well, and that's going to be white. And of course the padding, I'm going to set to about 20 pixels. No, sorry, I'm going to make it 15 pixels top and bottom and 20 left and right. I might change that. I'm just going to have a look and see what this looks like. Okay, we need to make sure this is a display block. That will allow us to add the padding. That's looking pretty good, to be honest. I want to add in a hover state, so I'm going to select the same CSS here, add hover, and I'm probably just going to change the hover to I'm not sure, you know. I might make it white. I'm going to try white. And if you do that, so you can see this is looking okay. And one thing I just noticed is that we need to set something. So up here, I'm going to target the anchor tag, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the same here. I'm going to set the text decoration to none, so there'll be no horrible underline. Set just the default styling for this site-wide. And then of course we're gonna add in a hover state. So if I add hover, and we can change this. So I just want to add in a few colors here. Actually, the background on the body I'm gonna change to this. So it's gonna look a little bit different. What's going on here? And I've got this hex code here, and on hover I'm going to change the links by default to this color. It's kind of a reddish pink maybe, and that's going to be fine. But also for the hover state, I want to add in a, because if you look at this now at the moment, it's very blunt, it's very sort of immediate, which I don't really like. I want this to be nicer, so to do that I'm going to add a transition. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in a transition for both the hover and also the normal default state. So it will transition when I hover onto it, and then it will transition when I hover out of it as well. So to do that, we just, in CSS, we say transition and all point whatever we want. So 0.4 seconds, could be anything, could be a second, be too much. In and out, ease in and out. And then obviously for support, need to add in WebKit, and then we need to add in Moz. What that'll do is I can then get a nice smooth transition. However, what I also forgot on this was I need to make sure the cursor is to the pointer, which just means that that's how I want it to look. But actually, this is the picking up the red I've set on the body, which I don't want. So I'm going to come back here more specifically, and on the hover of the list items, I'm going to set this to black on hover. Also, I've realized that with these list items, I've set right and left 5 pixel. I don't need that, so I'm going to say top 0 margin, right 0 margin, bottom 5. Actually, no, make this 5 pixels on the right. So what that'll do is when you hover the first list item, it will be right on the edge like that. And of course, it'll still have the necessary separation between them. And that looks fine. That looks like exactly what I want. Also, because I've added in this color here on the background of the body, I'm going to come back to the container and I'm going to add in a background color here and just make it white. So, and this is great. Every single time I save it, I save the file, it's and this is great because it's every time I save the file, as I said, it's adding in, it's compiling the code and updating it within my live preview. So that's really, really great. If I just come here and inspect this, I've got my content area next. And in here I got my placeholder, which is just a h1. So we're gonna return to Atom, and we're gonna close our header HTML because we're done with our header. And we're just going to come over to our content area and our content area HTML. And I'm not going to remove this just yet, but I'm going to create a HTML5 section. And I close this off here like that. And I'm going to give this, give it a class. And I'm just going to call this main. And in here we're going to have our h1, and then we're going to have a div with a class of content. Oops. And that's going to be our markup. So we're just going to say page header. And I'm just going to add in here some dummy Lorem Ipsum text, just so that I can see what I'm developing here and make sure all the padding and things like that is correct. So that looks about right. Now I can come back to my CSS, and what I want to do here is look at this section in CSS. So if I inspect that, I've got my main. This is a class. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go through the container and then point to main. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to make sure this is display block, width is 100%, and padding is going to be 0.10 pixels. If I save that, let's just add it in some nice space for us. And I'm gonna add in actually a margin of about 35 pixels top and bottom. That'll just space it out better for us. Now what you'll also see is we have our footer here, and this is within our container. I think this would work better outside full width, so that's fine. I'm just going to move my footer outside of my container, so that'll be here. And what that will do is I'll just take it outside, and what I'll do, if I look at that, is if I come back to my CSS, I can just target it normally. So if I say footer background can be black, color and you can put anything you want in your footer. I'm going to add in a min height of about 300 pixels. And yeah, you can add anything you want into the footer. For this tutorial, I'm not actually going to do that. I don't think it's necessary. So if I actually come back to my footer and my footer HTML, I'm just going to remove this, but you can put in anything you want here. Obviously, build this with your HTML as you wish. Just wondering here why this is. Right, okay. So I just made a mistake with the CSS. I'll just correct that here. I don't need that. That's fine. So, what we've done so far is we've mocked up our page. We've put in some dummy content, some content. And what I now need to show you how to do is actually navigate between pages within Angular. And what we're really going to be doing is navigating between components. So the way that it works is it's given a name which kind of encompasses it, and it's called routing. And what routing is it basically changes an area of the DOM. You can view it in a similar way to Ajax if you know what Ajax is or does or how to use it. But it basically reloads an area of your page without reloading the entire page. I've kind of hit on that several times in this tutorial. So what we need to do is we need to create so at the moment I've got a content area component. I'm going to use this as content that should appear on my home page. Now this could be anything. This could be text like what you see here. It could be images, it could be videos, it could be absolutely anything. It could be dynamic coming from a database, it could be JSON, it could be an array, whatever. It could be anything. We're going to use content area as the content that should appear on our home page. What we're going to create is we're going to create a link to an about page, and the about page should show the content for about. So the way that this works is each page basically is going to be a component. So remember how I said a component is basically the elements on a page. So you got logo, you got your header, navigation, content, footer. A component is also used to create pages and house the content of another page. So to demonstrate that, what we're going to do is we're going to come back to our app directory. We're going to create another component. So we're going to create another folder. So we say new folder. We're going to call this about. So I've skipped ahead and I've created my app, my about component. And what I've done is I've basically just as we did previously at the start of the tutorial, I created my app component.ts. I then included that in my app components.ts here, and then I went over to my app modules and I included it and then added it to my declarations. The one exception here is my selector. So this is where what we did before is a little bit different, because what we did before with the content area is we said we wanted to look for a selector on the page and we wanted to populate it with the content. Now that's fine for something like our logo or our navigation, which isn't going to change based on what page the user is on, because it's only ever going to be one. It's going to display on every single page. But this content is a little bit different. We only want it to appear if the user is on the about page. So we don't actually want to use the selector. What that also means is that if we navigate over to our content area component and we come back to our TS file here, we are looking for the content area. Now this content here, which is what you see right here, this should only display for the home page, because if you remember I said we're going to use this for our home page content. So again, this shouldn't appear on the about page. So we want to comment this out, and to comment out in TypeScript it's just the same as PHP. It's just 2 forward slashes. So what that's effectively going to do is it's going to remove that from our page. So don't worry about this erroring out here, but before I show you how to make this work, I just want to come over here to the official Angular website here, and they've got some great documentation here. They've actually got some great tutorials, but I'm going to add another link to this page here within the description of this video, because this is a really great tutorial on routing and navigation. So if you want to understand anything that I don't cover in this tutorial, then please just reference this and kind of go through it. It's a little bit extensive, and if you don't do it every single day, sometimes it helps to keep notes. So what I'm actually going to be working with is a Word file I put together here that just has various snippets of code I want to just copy in. That's going to make it a little easier for me to work through this and explain it at the same time. So the first thing, let's just close down what we don't want to use here. So none of this stuff is necessarily needed here. So what I've got open is my index HTML, my main HTML here. So I'm going to just delete this. So if you remember, the selector for our content component, which is on the home page here, was content area. I'm actually going to remove this, okay? Because if you remember, we got rid of our selectors from our components, and when we got rid of our selectors from our components, we're no longer looking for that. So that was actually what was causing our code to error, not compile. So that's actually a really good point, is that the only one of the few criticisms perhaps of Angular and working with TypeScript and all this kind of stuff is it doesn't really do a good job of showing you errors. If you work with JavaScript or particularly jQuery, with developer tools, you can go into your console and it will, 9 out of 10 times it will show you, give you a really good indication of what the problem is. With TypeScript, it doesn't really do that. And one of the things that we're going to cover on further down the line in this tutorial series is actually how to model and mock your data and various things like that. And that will be measures that will ensure that it will be much easier to debug and various things. But again, we're going a little bit ahead of ourselves. It's going to come back to this here. So as I said, we want to add in routing. So basically, the contents of content area is going to be our home page, and the contents of about is going to be obviously for the about page. So I'm just going to come over to this this markup here for our content page, and I'm going to copy this actually in for our about HTML, just because of all I'm going to do here is the H1. I'm going to change this to about, and then the for the content area, I'm just going to change the H1 to say home, so we know when we're navigating where we are. And that's about all we need to do for that. So let's look at how to add this in. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to come over to our app module.ts file, and we want to include or import another module which has been included for us already, which is fantastic. When we did our initial npm Node Package Manager installation, it declared all of these modules for us by default, so we can just include this in our application. So we're going to include this after our browser module on our app module ts file. So if I just paste this in, I can save that. The next thing is actually, if we come down to our ng module, we want to copy a bit of code here. So I'm just going to copy this in, and then I'm going to explain it. So after browser module, I'm going to add a comma, return, and just paste this in. Let's just correct the code, so let's tab it in. And literally what I want you to do is I want you to copy what I've written out here. And it's going to make sense in a second, because I'm going to return to this and I'm going to explain what this means. But at the moment, I just want you to follow along. The next thing is we want to return to our index.html, and immediately after our opening head tag, I want you to click return and just paste this in. And again, I'm going to explain all this later on. The next thing that we want to do is we want to return to our main.html file, and right after our nav, so this is where we have our content area previously, we want to add in our router outlet. So this is basically where we're going to populate our content. And then after that, we're going to return to our nav component, which is here. So this is our nav HTML. We got our anchor tag here, and we're going to paste that in. And what it is, I previously mentioned we're not going to use href. So with Angular, we have something called a router link, and we just add the path or the changes that we want in the URL. So this is going to be /about. And actually, what we want for this one, this isn't for home. So this is the home link. So this is going to be /. For about, we want about. So as you can see here, we have home, which is just going to be /, and the router link for about is going to be /about. Now this corresponds with what we added to our app module.ts. So if you look at this, the path for about, we're going to reference the relevant component. So this would be the about component, and the path for just / or nothing, well, that's going to be our content area component, which we said is going to be for the home page. So now let's return to our page here, our site, and you're going to see it's updated and it says home. And if we click on about, you're going to see that it navigates to the about component, and also you're going to see that it's basically based on a change in the URL. So I can come home and I can come about, home, home. So you can see what we're actually doing here. So this content could be different. So for example, if I come back to my content area HTML, I change this text and say this is my home page, and I could add images in here. I could do anything I want, and you can see how the content's updated. Thank you very much for following along with this video tutorial. As you can see, what we've created is a website in itself. It's pretty much fully responsive, but by the end of this series and in the next videos, we're going to be covering Angular, some of the best practices like how to model and mock your data, how to incorporate jQuery, pipes for things like currency conversion and various things like that. We're also going to be covering how to completely make this responsive in terms of how do we collapse this down into a burger menu. Obviously that's where jQuery is going to come in, etc. Methods and various things like that, including ng on init. Just to throw a few things out there so you can kind of research, look ahead, and kind of preempt what's coming your way. So once again, thank you very much for following this video tutorial. Please check out our official websites and use the various links included in this tutorial. Thank you very much for paying attention. I hope you've found it useful. And the final comment that I will make is how to close your application. So you will have remembered that earlier on in this tutorial we launched our testing server using Node Package Manager. To terminate it, you simply click on the X, terminate, and of course that will shut down your testing server and end this tutorial. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the next time.